So now we're going to look at appending to a list where you have one or more nodes already in your list. So let's just, to help us think it through, there's your list object, there's your head, and basically let's take the one scenario where you just have one item. Okay. Now I'm not sure if you've decided to do a tail, but well, for the time being, just stick to the head and see how your code would differ. If you're coming along and you're appending, and we'll call it ln again, so you're going to append ln. Essentially, you need the head, this item, to point to ln. So that's reasonably straightforward, right? So for one, you would just do something like head, next, whatever the next is, and point it to ln. That's the logic, that's not the code, right? You just use your get setter to do that same act. But that's the kind of logic of the concept. You get ln and you assign it to the next of the head. That's if you only have currently one. So that's interesting, right? Now, what we need to now do is what happens if we have two? Okay, now this is where it does get a little bit more interesting, because as we build the scenarios up, we start seeing the code clearly. So we already have two. So we have a head pointing to this one here. I'm just going to call it 1, and pointing to another, which is pointing to 2. That's currently pointing to null. Okay, so you're going to append your new one, but you want to append it to this one over here, not to the head, because that will overwrite this, won't it? So that code actually is only good if you only have one item, but the concept is roughly moving us in the right direction. It's this node here, let's just call this ln2, call it ln1 just for the sake of argument. It's the next item on there we need to add to. So this is why people use a tail to speed up adding and appending, because if you look at the logic of it, the tail always points to the last one. So instead of writing head next, what happens if we just had tail the next and we assigned it the incoming, right? Then down here in this scenario where we already have two, the tail is pointing to that one. And we'll talk about how this works, but watch this. If I'm appending, all I need to do is surely assign the new item to the next value of it, so it becomes attached. Then I need to shift the tail over to the new one, right? 2 lines of code, two concepts here. One is I attach the current tail, its next one, to the incoming, and the second step is then, okay, so now it's attached, that's no longer the tail, that is, so then I reassign the tail to that one there. So that looks like a much more general piece of code that also works for if you only have one. So that's the kind of reason I would recommend having a tail. It's a much more interesting challenge, but it depends on how much effort and exploration you want to do here. But I would also recommend you attempt to do it without a tail, and how far you can get with just a single head, and how you would have to traverse it to find the new item. Now that is quite a good challenge for those who are more confident, and it will build your coding skills and understanding up. But for those of you who are trying to find a logic that should reasonably be accurate, head and tail this is how it would work. So I would recommend that you code that